Praise and thanks is due to Allah. We praise Allah. We seek assistance and forgiveness from Allah. And we seek refuge in Allah from our lower selves and from the wrongs that we sometimes commit. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم. Allah says in the Holy Quran, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Did you come across those who deceive themselves on the path? فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ. Those are the ones who repulse the orphans with harshness. وَلَا يَخُطُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And they do not encourage the feeding of the needy. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. So woe to those who also pray. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Those who are neglectful about it. الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. They are those who want to be noticed. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَعْرُوفَ. But instead decline to assist in kindness. So what I thought I wanted to just do briefly today, since we also have a board meeting after this, I don't want to be too long, but to remind us of how sometimes, and sometimes we do this unconsciously, we get so focused onto the rituals of Islam that we forget that the rituals is actually there as tools, and it's supposed to lead us to a higher consciousness. And so this is the path that Allah is talking about, and sometimes we deceive ourselves on this path. And so this surah was revealed at a time when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because of his very overwhelming compassionate nature, he was always overlooking people, welcoming people, giving people the benefit of the doubt. And so often you see the surahs as they were revealed as if the Prophet has been checked. You know? Have you not noticed this? Have you not seen that? Did you not notice that person, how he approached you, and so on? So this is one of those surahs where the Prophet was actually checked. And it also gives us an indication that this was a human prophet. He needed guidance, divine guidance. And so it becomes a prophet that is an example to us. Had this been a prophet that had no mistakes, there was nothing we could learn from him. We wouldn't be able to use him as an example in our daily lives. So, and because the Prophet had just this welcoming nature, obviously some of the people had not good intentions, came to him, and they were part of the hypocrites that the Quran was talking about, the munafiqun. But there's a particular category of people who they're on the path. They might have good intentions in certain ways, but they deceive on the path. So the Quran is reminding us that that some of these people, in the way in which they deceive, is you will notice that they often don't support orphans, or they treat orphans harshly, or it's not a priority for them. And often those kind of people are people who they're very self-absorbed. They would say things like, I've got my own issues to deal with, and so why doesn't God deal with them? And you also find that these are the kind of people that are not feeding the needy, or seeing to the needs of people that are not so privileged. And you will find that when they pray, the intention for prayer, like the Quran says, we've given you prayer so that it can keep you away from nahy anil munkar and fahisha. So it's supposed to keep you away from shameful deeds and from unjust deeds. So that is what the ritual does. So if you are being neglectful in your prayers, you are unmindful of your prayers, you are standing there just because you want to show people you're actually a good Muslim because you pray 5 times a day, but the actual benefit of the salah you are not getting. And then the surah concludes that And you will often find that these are the kind of people that do not have the kindness of heart. And it's a very nice word that the Quran is using, ma'un. And ma'un, you'll see the classical translations translated as small kindnesses, seeing to neighborly needs, or kind gestures. But if you look at the Hans Wehr dictionary, it talks about those kind of acts that you do that it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. But it comes from a higher consciousness. It comes from compassion. It comes from kindness. And so it's interesting that the Quran mentions about salah and this behavior of certain people, because salah is supposed to, if you continue with it on a regular basis, it's supposed to bring a kind of compassion and a kindness, a kind heart. And you'll find that those kind of people who salah is beneficial for them would be the kind of people that want to go out and perform their social duties or responsibilities. And it's very interesting that the surah's name is Surah Ma'un, and the last verse, the last word in this surah is Ma'un. So Allah first gives us, as if Allah is trying to open up our minds, like look at this and look at that. And then coming to the conclusion and say, so if you want to kind of figure out people and be more conscious about who you're taking into your circles, these are the kind of signs that you need to look out for. And it all stems from this fact that there is a lack of ma'un, there is a lack of social responsibility that comes because of kindness and a raised level of consciousness. So the verse reminds us of a few things. One is that we need to be reminded of our social responsibility, but also at the same time that the social responsibility is not something that is forced upon, or that if you don't do it, Allah is going to punish you. And this is how we were taught as Muslims. But that it actually comes because you want to do it. You have a kind heart. And the verse also reminds us not to focus on the rituals, but rather to focus on the change that the rituals aims to create. So it's not the ritual that makes us pious, as most Muslims think, but it's what the ritual creates in you that makes you pious. And piety also doesn't sit in, being able to pray a lot and fast a lot and meditate a lot. Piety is, it's an attitude that you have developed, it's a consciousness that you have developed. So if I feed the needy, it's a pious act. If I look after an orphan, it's a pious act. If we want to connect to Allah, the Allah consciousness, we don't see Allah. We can only have an experience of Allah. And the only way we experience Allah is through His creation. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Kareem wa nafa'na iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikril hakim. There's also another verse in the Quran that's often misunderstood, which is also related to ibadah. It's when Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created the jinns, the invisible beings, and the human beings other than they may submit and surrender. Often when you look at the classical translations, it says that they may worship me. So now we're setting up a particular understanding of Allah, that He created us because He needs to be served in a particular way in terms of worship. And it makes God a very selfish, an arrogant, a needy God, that He needs people actually to worship Him. So when we study this word abd, the practical or the most common usage of the word in common Arabic language is a slave. But abd, if you look at the relationship that a slave has with its master, it could be one where he fears the master, or it could be one of complete respect and love for the master and a willingness to just want to serve the master. So the word ibadah is usually loosely translated as worship, but in essence it refers to obedience, submission and humility and in this case of the context of the surah, it's about surrendering. So when we surrender those things like ego, pride, selfishness, not wanting to focus on social responsibility and so on, that is when we bring ourselves in line with ibadah. So again, often you hear people saying, oh, what ibadat means, no? And often they refer to that he's wearing a particular cloak, or she's wearing a scarf, and they're praying 5 times a day and so on, and they consider that as ibadah. But again, ibadah is something that you strive towards, what you become. And again, these rituals, it's all about helping you to stay on this path of ibadah, stay on this path of surrendering. And often you will know what it is that you need to surrender. It's not about surrendering your time so you can pray more and all of that, but it's about surrendering those things that stand in your way of becoming more Allah conscious. And then the verse also talks about fitrah. So ibadah is a tool, again, to help us to stay on this natural path of fitrah. So for example, if you do pray and your prayer has helped you to be more conscious, to be more compassionate, then compassion is part of fitrah, because the nature of Allah is compassionate. The nature of Allah's giving and love, the reason why Allah created creation was because of compassion and because of love. So then when we do our ibadah and we have that focus in mind, then we become closer to Him. Also another thing that we often hear is people say that everybody is born Muslim. And people walk away with the idea that the whole world then has to be Muslim. Everybody has to follow the religion of Islam and be Muslim. But when the Quran speaks about fitrah, your natural state of being Muslim, the meaning of Muslim means to submit and to surrender. So you could be Christian and be surrendering, you could be Jewish and be surrendering. So the idea of when we say that everybody's born in a state of fitrah as a Muslim, it is not referring to a particular religion or particular practice, but again, a particular way of life, which is surrendering and submission. And also in the Quran, when Allah says that Inna deena inda Allahi al-Islam, verily the preferred way of Allah is surrender and submission. Classical translations also translated as the only religion preferred by Allah is Islam. So when we translate things like that, it becomes problematic. اللهم انصر المجاهدين في كل مكان اللهم يسر ولا تعسر اللهم تمم بالخير وأنت الكريم ميسر